The following news flash is brought to you by the Lone Star Lowdown, providing your daily bulletins for the commodities market. Today in history, news updates, and the inside scoop into the tides of the alternative. Markets for Monday, March 14th, 2016 are currently trading with gold at $1,243.06 an ounce, silver $15.49 an ounce, Texas crude $38.50 a barrel, and Bitcoin is currently sitting at about 412 U.S. currency. Today in history, the year 1971, the Rolling Stones leave England for France to escape taxes, essentially becoming British tax exiles. Their experience inspired the title of their famous album, Exile on Main Street. According to a 2006 article in the Daily Mail, the Rolling Stones have paid just 1.6% tax on their earnings of £242 million over the last 20 years. In recent news, after shutting down Austin for several hours and quite possibly causing the worst traffic ever, Barack Obama told the Texas Tribune on Friday at the South by Southwest Interactive Festival that, quote, the folks who are governing the good state of Texas aren't interested in having more people participate. Texas is typically a low turnout state, however, did have turnouts rise to 2.8 million on the Republican side and 1.4 million on the Democratic side, the largest primary showing since 2008. Though in reality, we are slightly only ahead of Louisiana in primary turnouts, giving us some perspective if by adding all the numbers you realize that nearly 4 out of every 5 adults in Texas voted nobody and refused to cast a ballot. A medicine derived from the marijuana plant has succeeded in reducing epileptic seizures in its first major clinical trial. The developer GW Pharmaceuticals, a London-based company, said that their drug Epidiolex achieved the goal of the trial, which was reducing convulsive seizures when compared with a placebo in patients with Dravet syndrome, a rare form of epilepsy. If Epidiolex receives regulatory approval, it would be the first authorized prescription drug in the United States, extracted purely from marijuana. Dr. Oren Davinsky of the Comprehensive Epilepsy Center at New York University Langone Medical Center said that the results of this Epidiolex pivotal trial are important and exciting as they represent the first placebo-controlled evidence to support the safety and efficacy of pharmaceutical cannabidiol. The Lone Star Lowdown is currently looking to fill some ad space. If you have a product or a service you'd like to advertise with us, feel free to give me a call at 210-363-2257. This is Rick Rohde with your Lowdown for March 14th, 2016.
Good evening and welcome here on this 15th of March, Tuesday, March 15th, 2016. It's summertime here in New York. Hope it's nice where you are. Maybe it's even springtime in Paris. We're going to find out in just a moment because we've got the great Gerold Aucoelman on the line with us in Paris, France right now. When we get somebody from overseas, sometimes we like to start the show right off with that. So, Gerold, are you there?
I'm here.
Thank you so much for being you, for doing what you do, and for coming back onto INN.
Always great to be here, Tom. Thanks for asking me back.
Now, Gerold, I do a lot of research for this program. I read a lot of articles. I read a lot of people. And a couple of years ago now, I saw some really perceptive stuff from you. You were writing for, what was it, Metro Gale or something at the time?
Yeah, I had a blog a few years ago, and that sort of, I guess I was writing a lot for Global Research at the time.
Okay.
It's probably where you saw those articles. I'm not really sure now, but I'm actually writing a column for American Herald Tribune right now.
Well, that's what I wanted to do, is to bring everybody up to speed. You've come a long way. You've come a far way. And we're really proud of you and your work and your insights. I just get people who don't know that you've been on the show, send me email. Look at this guy, look what he's talking about. And I said, oh yeah, old friend of the show, So anyway, congratulations on your new position.
Back a long way. I mean, we have had a lot of discussions, even ourselves outside of the radio show, on many issues. And I mean, you and I could kind of talk for hours and hours and hours.
They say that about the Israelis. I mean, Irishmen. The Blarney. Okay. And speaking of which, it's Paddy's Day coming up shortly as well. It probably means a lot more in New York City. I don't know.
Yeah, it probably does, actually. It probably does mean a lot more in New York City than it does to the Irish, anyway. Yeah, it's the Irish expat community tends to be more into Paddy's Day, don't they? Because it's kind of Paddy's Day in Ireland all the time,
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, Garo, let me actually, this comes on to something. And we're going to get to the topics of the day, I'm sure, whatever they are, we're going to get to them. But speaking of Paddy's Day, okay, so, St. Patrick's Cathedral here in New York City, a couple of miles away from where I'm talking to you right now on Fifth Avenue, grand old European style cathedral, beautiful church. And, this whole Pussy Riot psyop from Russia, where these lousy, would-be punk rock, they happen to be women, the lousy act. I saw the act, terrible, because they feel like they missed the punk rock thing the first time around. And sure. They're getting paid by somebody, and they want to do this performance art in a cathedral, I don't know if it was St. Basil's, but one of the big cathedrals in Moscow. So they're doing their vulgarity either on the stage or right in front of the stage, and the Moscow police do what the police in any city would do. They arrest them.
Yeah, I was just talking about this today. It's a bit of a coincidence that you mentioned that, because, I mean, it's just...
Well, let me finish my side with St. Patrick's, and then I'd like to hear your thoughts, because get this, right? So of course, this is a big psychological operation. It's a huge issue now, where you're taking the kind, decent sensibility of people who have been so dumbed down that they don't even understand the difference of anything anymore. And anybody, stubbing their toe, and you have to go to the UN and make a law to prevent it. So they're playing on these are women, so they're feminists, and suddenly it's not the Moscow police who arrested them, it's Vladimir Putin, because they sang a song against Vladimir Putin or something like that. A big psyop. And then you have Charlie Hebdo right there in your town. And then you have Je suis Charlie, free speech, free expression, and everything else. And I'm like, okay. So are we going to invite Pussy Riot to do their act on the altar at Notre Dame? And while we're at it, why don't we show everybody how much better we are than the Russians, and we'll invite them here to New York City, okay? And they could do it right on the altar of St. Patrick's. And we might as well have a trifecta while we're at it. Let's do a triple play and get a synagogue and a mosque in there at the same time. And you tell me, with the New York City's finest, half of them, it seems, are Irish, who march past that very cathedral every St. Patrick's Day in kilts, playing bagpipes, and you think New York's finest is going to give them the kid glove treatment and say how great they were for free speech? There you have it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's so obscene, isn't it? I mean, you send these talentless idiots into a Russian church where, frequented predominantly by senior citizens, like our mothers, our grandmothers, predominantly that generation. The old idea of reverence for older people, respecting older people, just doesn't exist. They're the antithesis of human values, these people, aren't they? They just go into a church, deliberately commit acts of obscenity. I'd imagine if you even thought about doing that in New York, you'd probably be, you'd be arrested as soon as the thought was registered.
Well, not just anywhere, especially if you tried it in front of in St. Patrick's, they'd crack your head.
Yeah, I mean, if you tried that here in Paris, in Notre Dame or something, I mean, you'd be arrested at the door. You wouldn't even get past the door with this kind of thing. I mean, that's the whole Sorosite psyops, agenda, isn't it? Just to create groups of destabilization who commit acts of outrage that will definitely get them arrested, and then those acts the so-called regime gets the blame. Pussy Riot, the whole idea of feminism is basically women going around naked. Wow, that's really radical, isn't that?
Well, I don't know. It sounds like we're going back to the old days, if you ask me. I mean,
it's just this carrot. What we're seeing with what we're seeing we've been seeing in the last 20 years, essentially, leftist ideology caricaturized to the point where it's a real sort of reductio ad absurdum. Like, so you have a revolution in some Eastern European country. Of course, there's no revolution, there's no economic program, there's no change. You just have people jumping up and down, throwing tomatoes at police and then getting shot, and then snipers entering into the scene, and a lot of people get shot, and then a regime is changed, and things just get worse. Or and
then all the kids that were out in the street who thought it was for real get pushed out of the way.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, everything is just fictional, and it's just it's a sort of make believe world where imperialism is advancing in sort of dressed up in left wing clothing. Everything is now, so it's kind of all this sort of the whole political correctness that we see just completely taken over Western society. It's all of that's driving imperialism. It's the ironic thing. Political correctness is the kind of secret arm of imperialism nowadays. Which actually in a kind of ironic situation where imperialism has become left wing.
Well, we call it the pro-war left, and it's actually an old imperial tactic where you take a put upon minority somewhere and you put them in charge.
Yeah, sure.
Right, and so this is what we have now. Yeah. We've got some very formally put upon minorities, and I feel bad for anybody. I'm not in favor of that. Okay. But you take people who have a chip on their shoulder in the first place, and then you change their status into special statuses and so forth. So you've got, all kinds of laws and stuff. People are losing their jobs and things over a very small fraction of the population. It's really starting to get kind of crazy now with this transgender gender agenda, where children are being told that they can decide, what they want to be, despite what the fact is of what they are, and now there's laws being promulgated. This is what the imperialist agenda has always done. They go into a place and they take and then everyone else gets in trouble if they don't like it.
It's complete perversion, isn't it? It's complete. What is happening is that ruling class perversity is being imposed on everyone else, and the whole idea of meaningful relationships, consensual sexual relationships, all this kind of stuff, the stuff that basically is the kind of fabric of human society, of civilization, is just being pulled apart by these genders. I mean, if you look at, I didn't realize this until recently. I was, reading the works of Riemann, an American researcher on sexuality. I didn't realize that the reports, the studies that kind of normalized and very much legitimized homosexuality in the United States were based on Kinsey. And Kinsey was the rampant, pedophile. There's a lot of pedophilia in those reports. I don't know if you've read that stuff, but
No, I know that about Kinsey, but I think it goes further back. I think it goes to the Frankfurt
I know
School.
That. I actually know that. I was quite shocked when I read that. I was like, I had never, because these are things that I always more or less accepted as kind of normal, because you're just told that they're kind of normal. Like, I never had a problem with homosexual people. I've known them. I work with them. It's kind of like, it's never been a problem for me personally. And I always accept, but this is just, some people are like this and some people are like that. But kind of in a political sense, I never realized that there was actually kind of an agenda behind this. And not only that, but I didn't realize that, when the Russians were talking about a link, a disturbing link, between homosexuality and pedophilia, I had no idea what they were talking about until I saw these studies, and then I realized, my God, there's actually, why wasn't this in the debate? Why aren't we not talking about this? Because this is very serious. And instead, it's all about gay rights and minority rights. Well, what about the rights of the majority? What about majority rights?
Well, I think gay people should have the same rights as everybody else. There's no question, and they shouldn't be put upon. But I think it goes a lot further than. Hold on, Geroda, because we got to take a break. Hold on, Geroda Coleman is with us, and we'll be right back with him just after this.
You are listening to the Logos Radio Network. LogosRadioNetwork.com.
They sound the same.
right, good friends, welcome back. Tom Kiley with Gearóid O'Coleman, our friend in Paris via Ireland. And, this is our sort of pre-Paddy's Day show, I suppose. Gearóid, before we go back to those interesting topics, let me just reiterate, you're writing now with the American Herald Tribune. That used to be the International Herald Tribune, or is it a different paper? What is that?
No, it's a completely different paper. No relation.
And what relationship does it have to America or the United States, I assume, with a name like that, if any?
Just the fact it's based there. But the editor-in-chief is Professor Anthony Hall. So he's basically in charge of it right now. So, but it's an independent news source. It's based in America, but it has no link to the International Herald Tribune, which I believe is the New York Times. And you probably, I think readers will notice that the editorial line's a little bit different to the International Herald Tribune as well.
Start sending me your pieces and I'll go over them. I'm not sure how to find it. Well, listen, let's go back, a little bit. Look, when I'm on the downhill side of my life, unless I luck out and live to be 124 years old, which I suppose could happen. But, I
wouldn't be surprised.
Well, let's see. You were talking about the sensibilities of older people and stuff before, as that famous American philosopher Richard Pryor once said, you can learn something if you listen to old peoples because they didn't get old being no damn fool, But in any case, it's a fascinating thing that I witnessed. I come from a liberal, progressive New York background. And, I was raised on John F. Kennedy and the Eisenhower era. This was an amazing situation. On the heels of Franklin Roosevelt, creating the American middle class, and my family lived and had its boat lifted way high because of that whole thing. First generation in my father's family to go to college, first generation in my father's family to own their own home, things like that. The country was hitting on all cylinders for most people, but not for a lot of people, not for everybody, but we were working on getting everybody into that boat, and then it all went wrong. So a lot of that had to do with progressive politics and that sort of thing. And then came the 60s, which I lived through, and a lot of dumb stuff was assaulted in the 60s. And, you feel like it's a linear thing, that you're just going to keep going into this progressive future. But in fact, the older you get, the more you notice things are cyclic. And there's a balance. And if things are too far out of balance, I'm a balancer. If things are too far out of whack one way, I head in the other direction to create balance. And all my life on most issues, I've been heading to the left to create balance. Now the seesaw has gone so far down on the left side on so many issues, it's time to turn around and head the other way just to balance it off. Does that sound crazy?
No, I mean, the thing about leftist ideologies, I mean, I don't subscribe to it. I'm a communist. I'm very clear on things I stand for. I stand for, proletarian dictatorship, and repression of the bourgeoisie, not compromise, not class collaboration. I've always advocated that. But the kind of leftism we're talking about is petty bourgeois leftism. It's sort of accommodation with capitalism, but you keep changing everything. And that is the kind of leftism we're talking about. It's you've already mentioned the pro-war left. This is kind of the Democracy Now! Left, the Chomskyite left, Trotskyism. These movements, basically from the 1960s, took over the labor movement. And so, workers in Europe and the United States have been fed that ideology ever since. And if you look at, how that works, you've got a situation where through mass immigration in the 1990s, the black labor force, the black proletariat in the United States, who had been organized, unionized, and had a certain degree of mobility and dignity, they were dispossessed by Latino workers from Latin America, from Mexico, and so on. And a lot of them were no longer able to get a job from that period on. And they became a lumpen proletariat. In other words, they were no longer able to get jobs because Mexican workers were driving down the wages. They were not unionized. And black workers fell by the wayside. And, drugs and criminality and so on and so forth, they ended up in jail. That's why you have such a huge black population in jail today. Obviously, a lot of Latinos in there as well. But, when we talk about immigration, if you talk about that, the way in which immigration is used as a tool against the working class, you're denounced as a racist. So you're a racist for saying that the black guy in the United States can't get a job because the Latino guy is going to get it instead because he'll work for less hours, he's not unionized, doesn't speak English, and so on and so forth. It was actually mass immigration in the United States that sabotaged the labor movement. It's the reason why the United States doesn't have an organized labor party. It doesn't have a labor party. There's never been a party of labor in the United States. And the reason for that is because the labor force has never been sufficiently homogenous culturally, linguistically. Linguistically is very important, of course. You can't organize if you don't speak the same language. And the only period when they were reasonably homogenous, now I mean homogenous as in naturally born Americans, doesn't matter, I'm talking about national Americans, whatever their race or ethnicity. But if you look at it when they were homogenous, so let's say culturally and linguistically, they had a reasonably strong labor force, as in the 1950s. Of course, you had the anti-communist scare in the 1950s, but you had rising wages in the 1950s. That was a period that coincided with a stop on immigration in the United States, or a slowdown of immigration. And so when the conditions of labor for laborers get worse, it tends to coincide with mass immigration. And none of this, of course, is discussed when we talk about borders. We talk about opening borders and closing borders. We talk about encouraging immigration and so on. Because of political correctness, because of this petty bourgeois left, it's not actually interested in poor people and workers. It's just interested in changing everything all the time, opening everything up, sabotaging everything, perverting all kinds of values. And it's a sort of a zero consciousness of everything goes,
Well, in this case, also, they're the handmaidens of the oligarchs who don't want to see labor be very powerful.
Absolutely.
And it's they're the front line for them. They're the avant-garde
of capitalism. Yeah.
And I wish it was capitalism, by the way, because it's not.
Where we disagree. Capitalism for me is the extraction of surplus value from labor. That's what I see as capitalism. I mean, the word caput comes from that. It's
right. But what I'm trying to say is
that's what I see capitalism as. But I know there's a libertarian view as well.
Well, no, but I'm saying capitalism is not supposed to be bailing out the banks. You know what I'm saying? So it's not really even capitalism, whatever the hell it is that we have. You know what I mean? But in any case, and then we're not even talking about illegal immigration, okay, which is even drives wages down even more. All right. Sure. And this brings us all the way around. Now, we only have about a minute and a half left before we got to take a break. So we'll pick up on this on the other side. But this brings us full circle around to Donald Trump, who is shaking everything up all over the place.
Just before he comes from, you're absolutely right. It's illegal immigration, which is the real problem in terms of driving down wages. Because if you have legal immigration, it makes it much easier to organize labor and to make sure that the laborers coming in get unionized, learn their rights, and that they won't be working for less wages. You're absolutely right. It's the illegal wages, the illegal worker, the worker who's come in. It's a terrible term, illegal worker, a registered worker.
People without legal status, they can't complain. They've got nowhere to go to. They got lousy working conditions. They've got no security. If they don't like it, they're out, and they can't complain to anybody. Or worse, they can get arrested.
The host country, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, and
Trump. Yeah, what were you going to say about Trump?
Well, we're gonna go into break, so we'll talk about it on the way back. But here's this capitalist who is talking about these issues, and he's got both the entrenched powers that be on the right and the left going crazy.
Yes,
to get rid of them.
The hysteria about Trump is hilarious, really.
And if you boil it down, if you look at what he's really saying, they are constantly lying about him. In the press.
The pretty bourgeois left, they love to hate Trump because he's the caricature of I guess everything they hate, really, isn't he? And the thing about
we're going on a break. Hold on, Garrodo. We're speaking with Garrodo Coleman, but I'll leave you with the following thought. Just because you're a rich guy from New York and you were a minor member of the oligarchy doesn't mean you could be a lousy president. That was FDR.
Ever think about all the things you toss into the garbage and how they might someday be used against you? Well, most of us don't. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht. In a moment, I'll tell you why you should.
Google is watching you, recording everything you've ever searched for and creating a massive database of your personal information. That's creepy, but it doesn't have to be that way. Startpage.com is the world's most private search engine. Startpage.com doesn't store your IP address, make a record of your searches, or use tracking cookies, and they're third-party certified. If you don't like Big Brother spying on you, start over with Startpage. Great search results and total privacy. Startpage.com, the world's most private search engine.
Billionaire casino mogul Kirk Kerkorian was perplexed when his much younger wife Lisa turned up expecting. Kerkorian smelled a rat because a few years before, doctors had determined he was medically unable to father a child. He suspected the father was Hollywood producer Stephen Bing, notorious for also fathering actress Liz Hurley's baby. However, to no one's surprise, Bing refused to take a paternity test. So Kerkorian hired an investigator who went fishing about Bing's garbage from the curb outside his house. They hit pay dirt when a used piece of dental floss yielded the DNA evidence linking Bing to the newborn baby. What did you throw away today? I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht. More news and information at CatherineAlbrecht.com.
You're listening to the Logos Radio Network at logosradionetwork.com.
Descendants of Beethoven, oh, they took on the 1980, we
right, good friends. Welcome back. Tom Kiley, INN World Report Radio, and we're here with Gerold Okolman, who is staying up rather late, thankfully, in Paris, France. What's the weather like there in Paris right now, Gerold?
Well, it's a little bit, it's colder now than, it was a nice sunny day today. It was a nice Paris spring day, and now it's quite cold. But the weather is quite good this week, so.
All right,
I can see the clear sky. There are no strange, lines or anything in the sky.
the chemtrails?
Sky
the chemtrails? I got a picture of the Arc de Triomphe. No, it's the Eiffel Tower. I'll have to send you.
It's the jets flying or something.
Yeah, they're spraying poison on us. Look, by the way, it looks like, friends, that Donald Trump will take the state of Florida. They're projecting now that he's got 46% of the vote in Florida. And little Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida, is coming in a distant second at 26% of the vote. So that's it for Marco, I would think. And Trump looks like he's neck and neck with Governor Kasich in Governor Kasich's home state of Ohio at the moment, with Kasich having a slight lead. So there you have that. So let's get back to it and talk about, we were talking about this whole Donald Trump phenomena. And by the way, before we vacate the point totally, if I may go back a little bit, are you familiar with the Frankfurt School? And
Yeah, I studied them in university. I mean, I read Adorno, I read Marcuse, Horkheimer. Yeah, I know.
Well, a lot of your social breakdown and pedophilia and the normalization of that and that sort of thing came from those guys too. Right?
Well, I generally it was an attempt by social researchers in Germany, in West Germany, to present a left-wing alternative to the capitalist order, which would not threaten the capitalist order. And so it was all about what I've said. Again, I know I use this term too much, but petty bourgeois leftism, it's all about kind of being left, being sort of anti-capitalist and progressive, having a certain idea of progress, but not actually endorsing socialism. And this kind of thought, it sort of took over the universities in Western Europe and in the United States, but it had no real traction in Eastern Europe, in the so-called communist bloc, the proper democracies of the Soviet Union. They saw through the vacuity of a lot of these analyses, and that's kind of significant in the way in which we talk about major issues today, like immigration. There's a lot of Marxists, for example, in East Germany today, who are against immigration because they see it's class war, and it's for that reason. Whereas you'd be called a fascist in the West for saying that because of what they refer to as cultural Marxism, and that comes from Herbert Marcuse and this whole kind of cultural counter movements that exist in the 60s, the hippie movement, and all that. And so it's a kind of it's a deeply reactionary politics, in fact. But it sort of presents itself as being left-wing. And as I say, it's become the avant-garde of imperialism nowadays. But it's something that you don't find, for example, in Russia. You don't find it in Eastern Europe. They're very logical in their approach to things because they had a concrete experience of socialism in those countries. They know it. They read Marx. They know what it is. They know what class struggle is all about. And they haven't been completely colonized by this kind of this cultural disease of political correctness. And political correctness is just something we've got to smash, and sort of throw in the bin so that we can look at things analytically and logically and clearly and kind of try and find a way out of the mess we're in. Because if we don't, things are just going to get worse and worse. And, you can see all these petty bourgeois leftists like the Chomskyite kind of media, Democracy Now!, they're all getting funded by Soros. All these pseudo-oppositional media that's getting funded by people like Soros, you can see why they are, because if they didn't exist, capitalism would not be able to survive. Imperialism would not be able to survive. They are the absolute lifeblood of the imperialist system because they create the impression that there's real opposition, that there's real, there are real movements against capitalism and so on. Bernie Sanders that's absolute example of that. Left wing coming back again. The whole idea of Labour fighting back in the United States, it's complete nonsense. Bernie Sanders supports all the foreign wars. He's even more imperialist than Trump.
Well, we call him Bomber Bernie. Oh yeah,
capitalist than Trump.
Yeah, he's way more pro-war than Trump. Absolutely. And his solution for the Middle East is to get the Saudis more involved. And it's like, Bernie, if the Saudis were more involved than they are already, they'd be doing security for you at your events. You know what I mean? Come on.
Bernie Sanders is an example of that whole political correctness gone mad. He's playing up and, I'll be so nice to the Muslims. Yeah, well, why don't you go out to Syria, Bernie? Why don't you go to Damascus and, assess the situation yourself? Why
don't you talk to Israel and get them to take in some of these refugees from the wars that they've helped start over there. They're right there. They don't have to go all the way to Europe. You're right next door in Israel. How many of the refugees from Libya and Syria and Iraq, everywhere, are you taking in that country?
I'm so sick and tired of these fraudsters, these social democrats, Sanders, Tsipras, Corbyn, the whole lot of them. They'd be the first people I would send to a labour camp after a socialist revolution. I know that's a radical thing to say.
Corbyn seems like he folded faster than a cheap card table.
In Siberia, because they just, oh my God. Like, the thing about Trump is that at least he kind of is what you see is what you get to a certain extent. And a lot of what he's saying is actually, quite interesting when he talks, even though, of course, he kind of contradicts himself all the time, like he's going to make America great again. Like, when was it great? I mean, when was it great? What period? He's talking about Reagan. The Reagan era, great? Come on, for God's sake. So he says something crazy like that. And then he says something very logical, like, I'm going to, cooperate with Putin and Syria. Or, things were much better under Assad, Gaddafi, and Saddam Hussein. So, like, you can see that underneath that kind of quirky craziness that he portrays sometimes to appeal perhaps to popular votes, popular sentiment, there's a very logical line that he's getting across in foreign policy that I've seen coming through, and like none of the rest of them have made these kind of statements,
Well, he could be crazy like a fox, right?
Everybody knows that the Saudis are funding terrorism, and that one of our allies, and I can't mention who it is, and it is, and I know who it is funding terrorism in the Middle East. Well, who could that be? He's already mentioned that the Saudis are funding terrorism, are backing terrorism. I doubt if it's the Turks, because U.S.-Turkish relations, are often quite turbulent due to the Kurdish issue and disagreements on lots of things. So it's obviously Israel he's talking about there. So, he's a guy who's actually able to have a dig at Israel because I think he feels that he's financially independent. He doesn't need all these Jewish bankers behind him. So he's kind of like, I don't give a damn about you guys. At the same time, of course, I think he was delivering an address to AIPAC. Is it today or yesterday or tomorrow? Recently. I'm not sure if he's actually done that yet. But I'm sure he'll bow down before
I think he skipped AIPAC.
Did he?
I think maybe not AIPAC.
Well, if he skips AIPAC, then I think he'll probably be, there'll be a body bag somewhere.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean AIPAC. He skipped the other big one, the conservative one.
He won't even get there. Obviously, a heart attack or.
Yeah, no, there's another one. There's another one that's not AIPAC, but it's the conservative one. He skipped that one. He blew them off.
Skip AIPAC. He's going to have to turn up in AIPAC and bow down and kneel before them. Sure, he's the kind of guy who's able to do that because that's basically what he is, and he's a businessman. So he'd go up there and sell.
And he says that. They criticize him. The Republicans go, "You've given money to Hillary Clinton." He says, "Yeah, and I gave money to Jeb Bush too. I have to. I'm in business."
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is that I just think that a lot of people. I mean, obviously, I personally have no faith in him whatsoever. I don't believe any candidate in this race who could change anything would be in this race because I think the system is so corrupt with money, and they're all liars. But if I had to choose between the three terrible candidates that we have, Hillary Clinton, an absolute psychopath, a war criminal, the wicked witch of the West, the East. No, that's not the right expression. What should I call her?
You should call her something. But you know what? Right now we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with Garota Coleman. Later in the show, in about 15, 20 minutes, we're going to also be joined by Caleb Maupin. So this is going to be great. All right, we'll be right back.
Easy.
All right, good friends, welcome back. Garota Coleman with us in a sort of a pre-St. Patrick's Day mode here. And by the way, before I continue, Garota, I don't know if you follow this sort of thing or not, but a terrible thing happened over the weekend, and I'm going to devote some time to it on a future program. But somebody who has meant a great deal to me musically for the last 47 years of my life passed away this weekend. And I'm talking about Keith Emerson, the very, very talented keyboard player from England and, founding member of the Nice and then Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And he was just a real bright light in my life musically. In fact, his keyboard playing has been the theme song to this show since I started it in 2008. I think it was. We first got the show off the ground. It's America, his version of America from West Side Story, billed as the first instrumental anti-war song, and very, very sad. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in another program because we've got some great guests lined up. Did you know about that, Gearóid?
No. I didn't know about that.
The first reports came out that he died. He was 72 years old, and then follow-up reports make it clear that he apparently took his own life with a single gunshot wound to the head. He had been experiencing nerve damage in his right hand, and he could only use 8 fingers to play music with anymore. So I suspect that had him depressed. But in any case, all right. So, and then another thing, Gearóid, about the Frankfurt School. My take on the Frankfurt School is a little bit different than yours. They were originally Marxists who were trying to help get the revolution spread throughout Eastern Europe, and were bemused when they found out that it hit a roadblock in places like Hungary and so forth, and Romania. Mm-hmm. And they tried to figure the problem out, and they attributed it to, working class people who had very traditional values in family and church, and maybe even
that's absolutely the thing is working class. Traditional Marxism, classic Marxism was not liberal. Marx was not a liberal. Engels was not a liberal. Uh-huh. Lenin was not a liberal. Stalin was not a liberal. People in the East had experienced, revolutions that had, in many respects, were promoting family values. In Eastern Europe, in Albania, take Albania for example. The population was rising all the time. They didn't legalize homosexuality. They didn't Che Guevara, the first thing he did after the Cuban Revolution is he sent the journalists and homosexuals to a labor camp. These Marxists were not liberals. So the whole idea of this sort of anything goes, this is petty bourgeois ideology that was very much promoted by, the so-called cultural Marxists. A lot of right people call it cultural Marxism. I think it's a valid term for the Frankfurt School. So they realized
my understanding was that they
essentially was not being accepted in countries where they were experiencing a form of popular democracy, and all of the Eastern countries had popular democracy. Now, that's another thing. That's another myth about Eastern countries. They talk about dictatorships. They were not. Dictatorship is always a dictatorship of one class over another. And in Eastern Europe, if you take Germany, like the DDR, Deutsche Demokratische Republik, or what was it called, RDA, in the East German regime, they had a multi-party system. So actually, it wasn't socialist because it had several parties representing several classes. They even had a liberal party in the German parliament, in the East German parliament. So these were quite. A lot of the Eastern Bloc countries were different. Were quite different from the other. But the kind of one thing they had in common is they rejected Western bourgeois liberal ideology, the idea that anything goes. And they were very family-oriented societies. Like Germany has a demographic deficit nowadays. It didn't in the German Democratic Republic. They had they had growing
even more support for families over there, probably, I would think.
They had growing populations. Albania had a thriving population on socialism. It was only with capitalism that it's essentially capitalism destroyed, Germany's population growth. It's like they
come in with all of this Frankfurt School PC stuff, and
women have to work, and there's no time to have kids.
Yeah.
And the feminism. A German journalist, a very gifted German journalist, Eva Hermann. She was one of the kind of top German journalists for years. When she started talking about this, she just became a pariah almost immediately. When she started talking about how feminism had destroyed the family in Germany. It's a miserable country now, complete misery. No kids, one kid, nothing. Dying old, moribund kind of. Population going on holidays in Spain. You go to Spain in some of these places. I was in Fuerteventura a few years ago. All old Germans, just started living off, their retirement pensions and property, loads of property that they buy down at these places. It's like we're a failed civilization in Europe.
As a society, yes. This is the question. What is society for? And apparently it's for making a very tiny slice of the population ungodly wealthy, with the rest of us, the devil can take the hindmost as far as they're concerned. So, which is ironic because who would vote for this? So in a supposedly democratically based system like we're supposed to have, we're not supposed to be voting for this stuff. So it puts the truth to the lie. But I'll just finish up by saying my understanding was that the Frankfurt School sought to break down these traditional family values and sought to break down these religious values, which, by the way, it's fascinating, isn't it, to see religious values returning to Russia right now. Well, and you've got that. Well, let me finish. The head of the Orthodox Church breaking a 1,000-year feud with the head of the Roman Church, and him speaking out about economic injustice, as well as the Roman Pope speaking out about it right now. And this is a repudiation.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I personally don't buy anything the Pope says, or any Pope. I mean, I agree with the Protestants of Northern Ireland about the Pope. What was the expression they had? The F-U-C-K, the Pope. I mean, but that would be my position on the Pope as well. In spite of all his
all popes, any Pope, or this Pope.
And I don't buy any of the popes, particularly not this guy, because this guy just seems like a slime ball. Who's just going on with a whole load of anti-capitalist stuff. Doesn't believe any of it. I don't know what he's trying to do, but I trust him. I don't trust him anymore.
Well, what about the head of the Russian church? He's talking about usury,
wasn't he? He was caught with a $20,000 watch, and it was kind of admitted. I wrote about this recently. I don't trust him either. But the thing about the point I'd like to make about the churches, and we were talking about culture, Marxism, or the Frankfurt School, and so on, is that you're talking about kind of revival of the church in Russia. That's definitely true, and there definitely is an element to Russian civilization, which has a very important role for Orthodox Christianity. And that is definitely an ideology that is becoming very strong. There's been a renaissance of it, I think, since the fall of the Soviet Union and the popular democracies. I stress, I always refer to the popular democracies. I'm not buying any of this dictatorship, this whole idea this is a dictatorship. We live in a dictatorship as well. It was a different type of dictatorship. It had different modalities and different types of problems. But the point I make about religion, and one of the great myths of popular discourse about the Soviet Union, is that religion was banned there and you couldn't practice religion. Well, Article 24, I think, or 124 of the Soviet Constitution 1936 states clearly that all Soviet citizens had the right to practice religion, but that the state would not promote religion. There was a separation of church and state, but everyone had the legal right, according to the Constitution, to practice religion, and nobody was ever persecuted in the Soviet Union for practicing religion. This is a lie that's constantly going out about the Soviet Union. They did, in socialist Albania in 1970s, I forget what year it was now, but in socialist Albania, they did go so far as to ban religion. It was a terrible mistake, which the first secretary of the Party of Labour of Albania at the time, Enver Hoxha, opposed and spoke about, saying he thought it was going to be, it was going too far. It was, shouldn't do it. But the people decided to close the churches, and they turned them into restaurants and leisure centres, cultural centres, and so on. But generally in the Soviet Union, religion was always practiced, even, like if you go to museums in Central Asia, I was one in a museum in Uzbekistan a few years ago, and there was an exhibition of mosques that were being repaired and done up in the 1930s. So they were actually renovating.
Also, I think in the synagogues, the Jews did not have any problem in the Soviet Union either. I do hear from Mongolians that I know, though, that they took a very tough line on Mongolian Buddhism. But I don't know if you know anything about that or not. It'd be interesting to look it up.
I don't know every single aspect of it, but I do know that if the only problem they did have with churches is if the church openly opposed the state. Now, that doesn't mean...
Yeah, and Buddhists don't really do that either. So
that doesn't mean kind of preaching, expressing an opinion against the state. Yeah. You did have the right freedom of expression. But, for example, in the same way that Buddhists or a certain minority, a tiny minority, in fact, of Buddhists, Dalai Lamaist Buddhists in Tibet are taking up arms against the Chinese state. That's a problem. But, and they did have these kind of problems, and they did repress the church when the church took the side of the wealthy landlords against the new democratic state. But they never, and afterwards, once they kind of got the priests on their side to cooperate and go along with it, priests were participated in Soviet democracy and in Soviet life. So there were all kinds of problems with nationalism in Soviet Union because there were so many different republics.
Well, listen, I think we're just about out of time for this hour. The music has come up now. So hold on, Gerold Coleman, and then on the other side of the break, friends, we're going to be joined by Caleb Maupin. Now, Gerold and Caleb are going to meet on the show. We'll be right back with both of them.
Here's to you, my love, with blessings from above.
friends. Welcome back. Tom Kiley, INN World Report Radio. Hour number 2 just getting underway, and I've invited Caleb Maupin to join us, the rising young star. I call him young because I'm old enough to say that, here in New York, and now he's working with Russia Today as well. And Gerold Öckelmann is on the line with us as well. We're going to ask Gerold to hang on a little bit because I'd like to introduce these two writers, and later on in the conversation, Gerold will be joining us again. But let's now welcome back Caleb Maupin. Caleb, are you there?
I'm here. Glad to be here.
Well, listen, first of all, I apologize. We had some technical problems on our last show with Stephen Kinzer, and it caused us to go later, and then it cut into your time, and we ended up just finishing out the show. So first of all, I owe you an apology for scheduling you, but it's hard for me to get Stephen Kinzer, so I had to get him in when we did. Oh, sure. Hey, whatever. Stephen Kinzer is a great writer, and I heard a lot of that segment, and it was great. I mean, he had a lot of good things to say. Very good. And I've been working with him now. I've been interviewing him since 2003, since that great book, All the Shah's Men. And also, I suspected this was going to be the case, and it was verified for me just a little while ago. But we've got Gerold Öckelmann on the line with us, and I'm sure you're familiar with him and his work. And you and I are going to talk for a bit, and then I'd like to bring him in on the conversation perhaps in a little bit. But before we do that, are you familiar with Gerold and his work? I'm not, actually. Please introduce, let me know further. I'm going to. He's familiar with you and yours. So Gerold Öckelmann in Paris and Caleb Maupin here in New York. I think you guys share a lot of views. Gerold, you're familiar with Caleb's work? Yeah, I am. I think we corresponded once on Facebook or somewhere else in social media. And so I've seen Caleb's stuff, and I've read his articles in MintPress, but I've never actually had a conversation with him. Nice to meet you, Caleb. Well, nice to meet you as well. MintPress is a great news outlet full of, following stories that are kind of under the radar. They do a lot of good stuff at MintPress. Well, Caleb's working now also with Russia Today. They go to Gerold sometimes. Gerold's now working with the American Herald Tribune, and both of you guys are just doing fantastic. And I'm so happy that that INN has been following you guys along and enjoying in your success. Yeah, it's very exciting. You got a great show, Tom. Well, I've been working at it, but it's great because the audience is just absolutely fantastic, and you guys and the other guests like Stephen Kinzer and so many other people make it a great show. So, Caleb, and keep in mind, we'll bring Gerold into the conversation in a bit, but I see you've got so many interesting articles that are coming out. What's this? You want to talk about this latest one about gender struggles in China? Well, it's interesting. We're constantly being told in the media that women in China are oppressed, that, these NGOs that are funded by the State Department need to get more money so they can rescue women, that the Chinese government is just brutal and oppressing women. But if you look at the facts, they just don't add up. It's almost the opposite. Until the Chinese Revolution, women in China were having their feet crushed at birth, but it was the Chinese Communist Party that abolished that practice. It was the Chinese Communist Party that established, voting rights for women, the right to own property. The right to run for office. They didn't have any of this before. And in fact, women are very well represented in China today, including some of the CEOs that are emerging in the new Chinese economy. It just doesn't line up. And the forces that are lined up with the United States against China tend to have the opposite view. The Falun Gong. This is a religious group that is supported by the United States, got an award from the Heritage Foundation for everything they've done to fight against the Chinese government. They, in particular, really believe that women are not equal to men, and that any sign of women's equality is a sign that we're heading toward the end of times, the end of days. They call it the Dharma ending period. The Tibetan separatists, these are the people who want to break away Tibet, and they support the Dalai Lama, and they're, of course, getting support from the CIA and from the United States. They also have this belief that women and men are not equal, and that there should be kind of a patriarchal, feudal way of doing things. And in all the cases where it seems like the question in China is how you advance the status of women, it actually seems to be the Chinese Communist Party that's leading the way in these efforts. But we don't hear about this. I know just recently the Chinese government passed a law against domestic violence, and it's been huge, and they've been taking great efforts. And after my article was published, it was revealed that a government paper was leaked. Chinese government officials were talking about a need to push for gender equality more. So, our media is constantly denouncing China in relation to the issue of women's rights, but this doesn't really add up. Well, I think there's a ton of hypocrisy. But first question is, I can't say that I'm up on it, but I don't usually see many female faces, in the higher up higher echelons of the Chinese political system. Is there an issue with that? Is there headway yet to be made there, or am I just not seeing everybody who's to be seen?
And there is, and that's the point, though. I mean, the Chinese Communist Party, even though they do strive for gender equality, one of the points that they will always tell you is that, we have patriarchal, male-centered traditions that go back for thousands and thousands of years. And these things don't just go away when you have a revolution. It's not like you get a blank piece of paper and you can just build whatever society you want, And that they've been gradually trying to advance the status of women in Chinese society, and they've been doing so. Many great strides have been made for Chinese women. And it's not completely true that there aren't any powerful women in Chinese politics. From 1966 to 1976, probably the most powerful person in China, maybe the second most powerful, was Jiang Qing, who was Mao Zedong's wife and was the undisputed leader of the Cultural Revolution. So, that kind of flies in the face of a lot of things.
Now, then to your second point, or to another one of your points, there's no question that the Anglo-American, empire, whatever you want to call it, has been extremely hypocritical when it comes to, caring about the interests of women anywhere, for that matter, but certainly overseas. And I pointed out on this program a lot, we have to be in Afghanistan because if we leave, women are going to, be thrown behind the burqa and all this stuff, as if we really gave a hoot. I was going to use a stronger word about women in Afghanistan because, frankly, women had a lot more freedom in Afghanistan under Najibullah and the socialist regimes that we sent the religious fundamentalist crazies in there to destroy. So, we, on the one hand, we're telling everybody you got to go to Afghanistan because look what they're letting your women do. And then when they totally trash it, now we're saying, well, we can't get out of Afghanistan because look what they'll do to the women.
Well, and there's only one country in the entire world where women aren't allowed to drive cars, and it's very close to the United States. It's the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We're constantly hearing about Saudi Arabia's neighbor and opponent, Iran, and how oppressive they allegedly are about women. In Saudi Arabia, women can't even drive cars. There's so much hypocrisy around this. The human rights machine, you can call it. The National Endowment for Democracy and a whole lot of NGOs that are cooperating with the CIA. They know how to manipulate the issue of human rights, and they can just distort things and use human rights just as a bludgeon. I know the Chinese government issued a statement a few months back talking about the politicization of human rights and how human rights is not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be that we're striving for everyone to have their rights protected, everyone to have a good life, but instead it's just turned into something that gets turned on when it serves the interests of the rich and powerful people of the United States, and it's turned off and ignored when that's not the case. All over the world there is oppression going on, people being killed for their political beliefs, people being tortured. But we never hear about it because it's happening in countries where the governments are perfectly fine with the U.S. doing whatever the Wall Street bankers want them to do, and so we hear nothing about it. In the last 2 weeks, there have been 29 political assassinations in Colombia. 29. In Colombia, one of the only governments in Latin America that is completely friendly to the United States, there have been 29 political assassinations. Trade union leaders, community organizers are just being killed. But we didn't hear anything about that. Imagine if that were going on in Venezuela. Imagine if that were going on in Cuba, for example. But because this is a U.S.-aligned regime, we don't hear about any atrocities that are taking place there. The issue of human rights is very carefully manipulated to serve the rich and powerful forces in the United States, in Europe, and in Israel.
And on the other hand, and Geert and I were talking about this before, on this side, the traditional left has been so dumbed down that they can't see through any of this stuff anymore. And it's, they're ready to accept anything that Amy Goodman tells them. We got to go invade this country because they're bad for human rights, a right to protect or something like that. It's a very, very sad state of affairs.
Well, it is, and it's very sinister. If you want to know what the CIA is thinking or get a good idea of what the CIA is thinking, listen to what the Council on Foreign Relations is putting out. The Council of Foreign Relations, people have described it as almost the CIA's brain. They think of it, and the CIA does it. And their publication, the Council on Foreign Relations publication, is called Foreign Affairs. It's a magazine that comes out every 2 months. And if you look at the latest issue of the Council on Foreign Relations Foreign Affairs magazine, the latest issue, the headline is Income Inequality. And you read the first few articles, and it's almost like you're reading a Bernie Sanders campaign advertisement.
I would think it would be income inequality. How can we make it even worse from the Council on Foreign Relations?
You would think that. And the first few articles are all about income inequality, and we need to do something, and austerity is no good, and the banks are out of control. But then if you get a little further, then they've got articles in about how can we overthrow the Iranian government? How can we help topple the Russian government? How do we spread further chaos in Syria? It's very sinister, but the introduction seems to be left. People don't seem to realize, a lot of people in the organized political left are under the impression that the rich and powerful are all conservatives. So whenever anyone starts talking in a liberal or left-sounding way, they're therefore on the same team as the political left, and that's simply not the case.
Oh, no, George Soros. I mean, the oligarchy has a right wing and a left wing. I say this on the show all the time, gentlemen. The difference between the oligarchy's right wing and left wing is that the oligarchy's right wing wants to beat the slaves to death, and the oligarchy's left wing wants to give them a cup of water as they're being beaten to death.
Well, and I mean,
because they're so compassionate, you know.
At the time the African slave trade was going on, there was a big debate among the people who had the slave ships. Some of them argued that you should pack the ships as tightly as you possibly could, and you know, as a result, then some slaves would die on the way to the United States. But then there were others who said, no, don't pack it as tightly as you can, because then you'll lose money because so many will die. And that was an argument among those who ran the. Well,
listen, we got to pack the time here because we're going to run out. We'll be right back, friends. Caleb Maupin, and we'll bring Gerold back into the conversation as well. Hold on.
This is the Logos Radio Network.
Good friends, welcome back. Tom Kiley, INN World Report Radio. Caleb Maupin is on the line with us. Caleb, how much more time do you have for us tonight?
I can stay on until about half past the hour. Then I need to get back to things.
Okay, so then this will be good. All right, so this will be our last time. I just wanted to see if Gerold had anything he wanted to add before you and I continue to your comments there about the cynical approach to human rights and women's rights, particularly as it applies to in China. Gerold?
I wouldn't say I have nothing particular to add other than, I've never supported human rights myself as a concept, because human rights is an ideology that came about through the 18th century French Revolution and the American Revolution. And the whole idea of rights of man has always been about promoting property interests and, you know, the rights of private property. And traditionally, again, this is another thing that took over, you know, leftist ideology was the notion of human rights. Marxists never supported human rights. I mean, it was always about social rights, political rights, but never, you know, the idea of human rights, because human beings were always, you know, considered socially embedded and dependent on other human beings. So there was never, you know, this whole idea of human rights is itself a kind of corruption of left-wing ideology. That's why the human rights organizations are the avant-garde of imperialism today. I mean, they're the ones who are promoting the wars, providing pretext for wars, for humanitarian intervention. So I think not only, you know, rather than saying human rights organizations are corrupt, I just think human rights itself is a bourgeois ideology, which is sort of the right hand ancillary organization, if you like, of capitalist wars and capitalist intervention.
Well, they certainly don't carry it through, do they? It's convenient.
The international of the Workers' International, we have the Human Rights International, and that's the Human Rights International has taken over. And
the minute you want to go bomb somebody to oblivion, the human rights go right out the window. So, Caleb, how does that comport with? We were talking about this before you joined us. You know, this whole notion of you know, the political correctness and the Frankfurt School, and certainly the human rights agenda fits in there. But how concerned is the U.S. with human rights? You were talking about Colombia, for instance.
Well, you know, I've done a lot of reporting from the United Nations, especially back when I was with Press TV. You know, and if you read the United Nations Charter, it sounds particularly left-wing. It talks about the right to jobs, the right to an education, the right to housing, the right to food, et cetera. And after the Second World War, when the United States and the Soviet Union had been victorious over Nazi Germany and the United Nations came into existence, a lot of the documents that come out of that period sound really, really left-wing and radical. And it was based on the fact that, you know, the Soviet Union had been so key in the war, and then that you know, this is coming out of the Great Depression. There was a big, you know, left push globally at the time. So a lot of the documents that are used to kind of talk about human rights have a very, very left-wing sounding, or at least economically left-wing sounding character to them. However, I mean, we saw what the United Nations ended up being. In 1948, they created Israel, the slaughter of the Palestinians, horrendous. We saw what the United Nations did in Korea, killing at least 4 million people with bombs, and that even in the early days of the United Nations, it was just a smokescreen. It was just kind of a deception. But it sounds pretty good. A lot of it sounds really great on paper.
Well, you know what I love about the whole idea of the United Nations? The whole thing seems to have been sold as a concept that we need the United Nations to end wars because the little guys are all monsters who want to kill each other all the time. And there's no mention of the oligarchs who are the actual people who run the wars. In fact, the Rockefellers bought and paid for the land and donated it to the UN. So you know that they had a dog in that show, if you know what I mean.
Oh, completely. Absolutely. If you look at Ban Ki-moon, he's always giving speeches at Rockefeller groups, the Asia Society. He frequently will give speeches at a place called the Asia Society. That's completely paid for by the Rockefellers, one of their favorite think tanks about how to ensure the interests of the big bankers in Wall Street and controlling the economy and making lots and lots of money off of the peoples of Asia. A lot of these non-governmental organizations, the CIA does very little on its own. In terms of production, you can almost say the CIA are kind of like producers. The CIA, they have other people do the acting. They have other people provide the budget, but they themselves, they're the ones who, the CIA, they're the ones who make it happen. They go in and they do very little on their own because if they do it, then it's tainted. Then everyone says it's the CIA that did it. That's kind of how they tend to operate. And, one of the main things they do is transfer money from non-governmental organizations and foundations to people like the Euromaidan rioters in Ukraine or the Takfiri insurgents in Syria and other people that commit these horrendous atrocities to serve the interests of the big bankers and corporations.
I refer to them as Wall Street's goon squad. When Wall Street, oligarchs in your own country used to hire goons to break up labor movements and that sort of thing. Hitler got his rise being a goon, breaking up labor and communists and so forth in Germany. And on a global scale, you got the CIA doing that. So how does that sound for a moniker for the CIA, Wall Street's goon squad?
It's interesting to note that often there will be kind of a rivalry between the CIA and the military because they both want more work. The military, they are trained in the art of blowing things up, precision bombing, drone strikes, etc. And the CIA, on the other hand, are trained in terms of being strategic and having people on the ground and manipulating forces in a country and kind of carrying out these color revolutions behind the scenes. And often there'll be a rivalry between the two. In many instances, the military will line up with the Republicans and the CIA will line up with the Democrats. Many people speculate that the assassination of President Kennedy was actually done by the military because he was following the CIA strategy a little too closely. In his later years, he was talking about, those who make a peaceful revolution impossible, make a violent revolution inevitable. He was, doing the Peace Corps, which was an early part of these NGOs, the nonprofit machine, and he was really kind of siding with the CIA in strategical arguments, and that just wasn't going to make as much money for the military-industrial complex. He was thinking that a big, huge war in Southeast Asia might not be the best PR thing for the United States, and it might be better to have the CIA do it quietly, but there simply wasn't as much money in that, so we got Kennedy gone, and we got the Vietnam War.
If I may, I'm sorry, I need to break in with a news flash. Marco Rubio just dropped out of the presidential race here, for those who are interested. He had a rather dismal showing in his home state of Florida, where he should have won handily, but I think he got something like 26% of the vote or something to Donald Trump's 45%. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Anyway, do you have a comment to that?
In Florida. Yeah,
pardon me?
If you're a Miami Cuban and you lose in a Republican primary in Florida, it's time to drop out. It's that simple. I mean, that's really all there is to it. If Donald Trump can take Florida against Marco Rubio, someone who's just kind of the incarnation of what Republican politics in Florida have been for the last 50 years, it's clearly something's happening. The same thing is happening in Ohio with Kasich. If you look at what's happening there, John Kasich, he's a local figure, just runs very, very well embedded, was the governor of Ohio, very, very key in the Republican machine. And he's losing to Trump in Ohio most likely as well.
They have him neck and neck or slightly ahead, which is, again, dismal, for his home state.
Absolutely. So
I would say
Marco Rubio is out of the race, and it looks like the rank and file of the Republican Party is dissatisfied with what the neocons have been doing.
And that's, by the way, causing an issue. Trump has gone on the record as saying that he wants to be even-handed between Israel and the Palestinians, and that's flipping a lot of people out. But we're just about out of time for this segment. Caleb, thank you for joining us. Tell everybody one more time where they can go for your writings.
You can just go to my website, CALEBMAUPIN.info, calebmaupin.info. That's all of my work is up there, videos, writings, reports, etc.
Well, listen, Caleb, I apologize for what happened with Stephen Kinzer the other night. Thank you for coming back on the show.
Oh, glad to be on anytime. Thank you very much.
Very good. We'll be right back now, friends, with Gerardo Coleman right after this.
Here in the U.S., you can name your child pretty much anything you want, but creative naming and weird spelling won't fly in other parts of the world. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht, and I'll be back in just a moment with some surprising laws about baby names.
Privacy is under attack. When you give up data about yourself, you'll never get it back again. And once your privacy is gone, you'll find your freedoms will start to vanish too. So protect your rights, say no to surveillance, and keep your information to yourself. Privacy, it's worth hanging on to. This public service announcement is brought to you by StartPage.com, the private search engine alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Start over with StartPage.
Is it a girl or a boy? In Denmark and Germany, you should be able to tell by the baby's name. It's the law. For example, the name Matti is verboten in Germany because it could cause gender confusion. Several countries won't allow names considered harmful to a child's self-image. The names Adolf Hitler and Satan are banned in New Zealand, which might be understandable. But fans of the king of rock and roll might wonder why the name Elvis has been rejected in Sweden. What's not surprising is that Chinese baby naming laws reflect the country's control agenda. Parents must give newborns names that can be easily scanned by a computer for the country's national ID card program. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht. More news and information at CatherineAlbrecht.com.
Live Free Speech Radio, LogosRadioNetwork.com.
Something wrong! Man, I smell something wrong. Something wrong! I don't think I'll be around here long.
All right, good friends, welcome back. Tom Kiley, INN World Report Radio. Now, while we were on break, or actually just before, it looks like Senator Marco Rubio, or Little Marco, as Donald Trump started calling him, has now dropped out of the race, as he should. Probably should have done so a while ago, but he only got 26% or so of the vote, it looks like, in Florida, to Trump's 45%. And, it looks like it's a sort of a toss-up in Illinois right now. I mean, I'm sorry, in Ohio. Let's see. Yeah. Actually, Kasich is ahead in Ohio, 44% to Donald Trump's 32%. But that's that. Meanwhile, internationally speaking, we're on the line with Gerardo Coleman, and he's in Paris, France. Gerardo, what time is it over there right now?
It's 1:30. Okay. Yes, 1:35.
Okay, good. Well, thank you so much for staying up with us. I have some questions, but what else is on your radar right now that you've been writing about and you're interested, or perhaps you are writing about and it hasn't quite come out yet?
Well, I've been doing a lot of different things at the same time, really. I've just finished that long series on coercive engineered migration. I've just been trying to work through some of the issues there to do with the contradictions of the migration crisis. So a lot of the stuff. And I've just been doing a lot of interviews around the same theme, really, and the NATO wars, all of the NATO wars. I'm basically going to bring out a new series, which will be a sort of the other side of the coin, which is based very much, the title, I think, is going to be, I'm kind of trying to make the title similar because it's a similar idea. So the title I propose for this new series I'm going to bring out is Artificially Engineered Destabilization, Zionism's War on Africa. And that's based on the work of Charles Nana, who's a French Cameroonian journalist. He's a good friend of mine. He's the best investigative journalist in the African continent and one of the best French investigative journalists. He's just brought out a new book on Zionism in France. And I wrote this series, actually, I wrote about 5 or 6 years ago. Well, 6 years ago now. But I never published it, but it's kind of relevant to what's going on. It's basically about Israel's role in destabilizing African states. So it's going to be basically looking at more the Southern Hemisphere, particularly Africa, since the independence struggles there, and to try to kind of delineate the factors that led to the collapse of a lot of these new states after independence. So that's something I want to bring out in the next few weeks. And then I'm just going to put all that together in a book in a few months' time. And
good for you. Do you have a publisher for the book already? Has someone asked you?
Yeah, I have a couple, but I have a publisher I'm working with at the moment. But nothing's finalized. But I'll see when it's done. I'll see how it looks and see. I'm not really sure, but yeah, it should be out. It should be out, I hope, by the summer. Just try to get time to put everything together, because it's kind of time consuming doing interviews and stuff. I do a lot of interviews with the Russian media. Doing a lot of stuff with Russian language media at the moment as well. So and then I'm sort of doing a lot of stuff with French media. So
one sec, Russian language media. Do you speak Russian?
Waiting at the moment.
Do you speak Russian when you say Russian language media?
No, actually, well, I do speak Russian, but I don't. I've done stuff with in English for Channel 1 and Ren TV. So there are different, like the Russians are, it's incredible the quality of the stuff they're bringing out in terms of documentaries, their analysis of, global events. It's just far more sophisticated than anything else you get in Europe. It's incredible the stuff, the Russians get to see that we don't,
the whole thing is incredible from my perspective. Russia has really sort of rebounded, or is rebounding, from the malaise that, we seem to be intent on imposing on them after the collapse of the Soviet system. And they're so miffed that they've snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. All of a sudden this guy Putin comes along and, we almost had him,
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there's certainly a renaissance happening there of Russian civilization, if you want to call it that, it's refreshing for us. I suppose nowadays the only real way people can get some kind of perspective on things is to kind of profit from the contradictions of globalization. And the contradictions of globalization are reflected in the politics of multipolarity of the Russian state and Iran as well, with foreign news agencies in foreign languages that open up the debate and sort of break through the censorship in the West, even though, Russia has censorship as well. But I think they have if you look at, from my knowledge, which is limited, I suppose, but nevertheless, of the Russian media, they do have wider opinion, strata than in the West, as other countries in the developing world do as well, like Algeria. I mean, I only read the French press in Algeria, but my God, you can read stuff in the Algerian press you could never read in France, So this is a very positive thing, that you're seeing a kind of, finally a globalization of diversity through multipolarity, I suppose, through the Russian state's desire to create a world of different poles with different views and so on. So I suppose the only thing people can do is to try and tune into these different media stations, and at least you get some kind of balance, which didn't exist before.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with technology, which is why we're on the air. Technology has allowed for the alternative media to really flourish here in the States and then in Europe. And now it seems like finally the Russians and other countries are getting it. If you don't speak up for yourself and get it out there, you're going to have the table run on you with CNN and Voice of America, gone corporate. And I'm so gratified that they're doing it, because it's actually, I say this all along, but the best thing that ever happened to the majority of people in the United States was the advent of the Soviet Union. And I would also go so far as to say for European social democracy as well. The best thing that ever happened is the advent of the Soviet Union, because and the timing of it, it happens right coincidentally with the Great Depression, practically,
Sure. So put pressure on the elites to grant concessions to
exactly. And then what they thought was, with this ridiculous unipolar world that they, this guy Fujikama, the End of History. Did you ever see that book?
Yeah, I've read it. Yeah.
Oh my God, I tried to read it. I couldn't get too far into it. It's such garbage. But are you kidding me? And sure enough, look what's happening. The Soviets have shaken off the death grip that we had imposed on them, and they're starting to come back. And it's the avant-garde, as you put it, is in the media. But you watch. Now you got the Trumps. Now you got the rest of the people waking up, and they're going to find their champions. And it's going to start improving for people again, because there's a balance, because choice is in the air.
Yeah, the thing about Trump is that, of all these these horrible candidates. I was talking about Hillary Clinton. She's just a psychopath, war criminal, should be in jail. Bernie Sanders.
She probably will be before too long.
Just like Corbyn and all the other social democrat, petty bourgeois leftists, just playing on people's desperation and playing the Labour card, but working for the bosses. Trump is kind of like Joachim Flores. I don't know if you know him. That writer from Serbia described him as a self-actualized asshole.
I don't know. Hold on. Let's talk about that. Well, let's talk about. No. Wait. We got to go on break, Garota. I'm sorry. We're going to get cut off. So we'll be right back. Garota Coleman, one more segment, and we'll be with him on the other side of this break. Hold on.
Easy.
Good friends, welcome back. Tom Kiley, INN World Report Radio. It's kind of a second Super Tuesday here. The results are coming in. Looks like Trump's won Florida. Marco Rubio has dropped out of the race. Looks like Kasich is probably going to win Ohio by about 10 points or so. And it looks like Trump is going to win Illinois and probably North Carolina as well. So there you have it. Now, we're speaking with our good friend Garota Coleman. He's in Paris, France. He's up late. So thank you very much, Garota. We got one more segment in the show. Can we talk a little bit about Donald Trump? He is slowly winning a lot of people over. There are a lot of Democrats that are crossing over. The networks here, I just want to fill you in on some stuff and then sort of get the European take, because I know that there is so much power aimed against him in the media, in the right wing of the oligarchy, the left wing of the oligarchy, and they're little mindless troops on the ground. Like Soros's MoveOn.org, went and broke up one of his events, and it looks like Hillary Clinton may have been involved in all of that as well. But it's moving along. He's crass, that's for sure. I suppose he has a right to be that way as a billionaire. I don't think he's had too many people stand up to him in his life, and I think that's what we see a lot of times. But on the other hand, the guy's talking a great deal of sense, and sometimes the spirit moves you. You know what I mean? When you realize it can really change somebody. I think he doesn't have to be a jerk just because he's a low level member of the oligarchy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, look, if a millionaire or a billionaire implements policies that reduce wars, that actually paradoxically benefit the working class, I think some kind of control of mass illegal immigration into the United States would actually benefit American workers in the long term, because it would give them space to organize. As I said earlier, the left have been the avant-garde of globalization. The traditional Marxist left was deeply critical of mass immigration. They understood it as a weapon against the working class. It's like a lot of the other issues we discussed earlier, family values. These are things Marxists defended for a long time, particularly in the Soviet bloc, in the Soviet Union, in puppet democracies in Eastern Europe. So there is a sense in which a conservative like Trump can actually be more progressive than this kind of bourgeois or petty bourgeois liberal ideology being promoted by Clinton and Sanders. So I think we have to be open-minded. The one thing we can say about Trump is that he's unpredictable. The guy is just unpredictable, and that's a lot better than what we can predict with Clinton.
Oh, we know what we're going to. That's right. We know what we're going to get with Clinton or Sanders or any of the rest.
We're going to get with both of them. Right. Sanders will probably die before he's able to do anything anyway, and then we'll kind of get him off the hook. But Sanders is certainly not going to change anything. He's totally in agreement with Obama in Middle East policy. And he's another Tsipras, another Corbyn, another fraud. I hate them more than anyone else. I really do. I despise them because they sell lies to the workers. They give them false hopes. With Trump, he's certainly not left-wing, but he could do things that could paradoxically benefit the labor movement in the United States.
He's far left on certain issues. I mean,
well, this is the thing. I mean, he's not a leftist, but he certainly, even if he sort of implements more of an isolationist policy, that seems to be almost a pejorative term in the United States, but isolationism for the United States would be great.
No. I've had one of his brains on the show, Roger Stone, and he says, no, he's non-interventionist. Yeah. Not isolationist, but non.
But at least you have to give him the benefit of the fact that he's opposed the war in Iraq, even if it was
before it happened.
Yeah, he opposed
when nobody else, when no one else is.
He's not gung ho about. He's very, very critical of the war in Syria. I've said that he's the only candidate who's actually criticized Israel. When he said, and I know who it is, and I can't say who it is. Everybody knows it's Israel. Okay, so we at least have to acknowledge that. That doesn't mean that he's going to, not do what Obama did when he gets in power. But if we look
at least what Hillary's going to do, you know what I mean?
Compare his record to Clinton's record. Yeah. Then Donald Trump is, for me, the kind of candidate I'd like to see, just to see if maybe if he could surprise us, maybe he will surprise us.
Well, and if he doesn't follow through, if it isn't him, it's going to be somebody else, because this pressure is building. I think he's just the United States face of a revolution around the world that's happening. And you mentioned Corbyn. He's turned out to be a big disappointment. Podemos, I'm not really.
Podemos is another Soros outfit.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have a lot of hope for them. Ireland, we had the elections in Ireland. That's got a little bit of a hope. The fact is that the people are trying through the political system first, and let's see what happens. And I have every faith that if it doesn't work right, they'll keep pressing, and hopefully we can resolve this all politically. But the lie. I was going to say in Europe. Yeah, go ahead.
I've been criticized for kind of giving. Are praising certain policies of Viktor Orban of Hungary because he's considered like far right and fascist and so on. It's just complete nonsense. I mean, the guy is considered by the kind of people we were talking about, the people trying to legalize pedophilia, people trying to the ultra capitalists, people like in France, like Cohn-Bendit, Daniel Cohn-Bendit, who is an MP in the European Parliament. He has described Viktor Orban as the Chavez of Europe. Now, I said, that's not true.
That's good.
No, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It is good, of course. If he were a Chavez, it's good. I said he's not a Chavez because he doesn't defend the same ideology and so on. But he has actually instituted reforms which have improved the situation in Hungary for ordinary people. And he has kicked out the IMF. He has.
That's why they're trashing him. That's why they're bad mouthing.
He's very close to China. He's very close to Russia. He's against the war in Syria. He's very clear about what happened in the Ukraine. He said it's the United States are responsible for that destabilization, for the destruction of Ukraine, and they want to spread it around Europe. So he's saying a lot of things which do make him look like the Chavez of Europe, and he deserves the benefit of the doubt. And in fact, Orban's Hungary has a major energy project in Venezuela, which is to do with solar energy they're exporting there, which would be of huge benefit for Venezuela. So we just need to be a little bit more. We need to transcend kind of facile parameters of thinking when looking at these kind of leaders. I would certainly say, I would prefer to have Viktor Orban running the European Union than Daniel Cohn-Bendit, who is himself actually a paedophile and has admitted it and has been accused by Marine Le Pen of being a paedophile. Well, at least he's been accused of it and hasn't denied it. These kind of people are just the worst kind of people you could have. So I just think that we should be open-minded about these things and try to kind of go beyond the traditional facile, phony, right-left.
Well, it's breaking down, Garot. It was phony to begin with here in the U.S. that in order to steal elections, in order to, keep the majority of people down, they had to make us think that this country was split right down the middle. And they do that on every issue. That's what all this political correctness is all about. And people are getting fed up, and it is breaking down. And it's hard for them to keep it patched together. And as a result, different things are slipping out where the traditional divisions are not holding up anymore. Yeah, Trump is bad on some things, but he's better than the liberals on a lot of other things as well. He says, first of all, he's against illegal immigration.
Yeah.
And Europe and everybody else has him against immigrants.
Yeah, it's funny when you talk about illegal immigration. When I talk to African colleagues and close friends of mine here, who are French but of African origin, they're all against illegal immigration. I mean, they complain about the fact that since the 2015 flows of migrants to Europe, they see migrants coming into Europe with kind of all sorts of advantages, while they can't even get their mothers. Their mothers can't even visit them because of restrictions on, visas and all sorts of stuff.
Well, people who waited in line and did it legally, they understand what's involved, and they're
none of these
also
people
losing
are buying legal immigration. There's a lot of Algerian French who don't want any more immigration because they know that migrants are going to drive down the price of labor and that they're going to be destitute.
Well, listen, we only have about less than a minute. I'm going to just tick off a few things for you. Maybe we can talk about it offline. But yeah, he's characterized as being anti-Islamic or anti-Muslim because he wants to put a brake on immigration, willy-nilly from Islamic countries without vetting people, and yet, and so they're going crazy, calling him an Islamophobe, whatever. There would be a million more Islamic people alive today if he was the president in 2003.
Absolutely, yeah. And Islam
this
as
is
a religion would be thriving. It would have a much better reputation. Islam would be thriving as a religion because if people like Gaddafi and Assad were left alone, the Islamic community in all Western countries would be at peace. They wouldn't have to suffer the stigma of terrorism that has been created by the West and imposed on them. So, absolutely. I mean, if I were
listen, Garode, we're out of time.
I would vote for Trump on that issue alone. The fact that he said that people are just completely taking these things out, out of context.
All right, good friends. Garode Colemain. I'm going to be off on Thursday night. We'll be back with another show for you. It's supposed to be Roger Stone on Tuesday.